Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency Dr. Rani Thakur, President of the Royal College, Asma Khalil, Vice President, Hassan Shahata, Vice President, the distinguished panel, dear members and fellows and guests. Today I'm going to talk about the history and evolution of the Egyptian Representative Committee. The Egyptian Representative Committee actually takes its spirits from the Royal College. So let me start first by the first one who been appointed as a chair of the Representative Committee in Egypt, Professor Dia Saifuddin, Professor Ain Shams University, and he was first appointed in 1975 till 1979. Sir John Dewhurst was the president at that time. And the first honorary fellowship was given to Professor Fuad al-Hifnawi and Murad al-Abd. And this was followed by doing a part one ERC to help candidates who are planning to go to the UK. Before that, there was only some people doing their thesis in the UK, and then they take jobs over there. And then there was the clinical attachment post, so they helped that. They go to the British Embassy, make an interview, they go for clinical attachment for an assigned consultant in the UK, and after 3 weeks, they get actually an approval to get a reference, and then they can apply to the jobs in the BMJ or the British Lancet. So this is the way most of the people went, either this way. So part one, they had to go either to do it in the UK, but they can actually accept a 3 years of residency as 1 year in the UK, and they go and work there. So this is Professor Dia Saifuddin, one of the most famous clinicians in Egypt, and he was an FRCS and FRCOG. In 1978, Professor Mahran was appointed as the chair of the Representative Committee. And he actually the longest chair of the Representative Committee. He was a professor at Ain Shams University, was very sharp, and he was the Minister of the Population in Egypt, and the chair also of the Population Council. So we can see that there is Sir Rostom Feroz, there is McNaughton, Anthony Almond, George Pinker, Chamberlain, Naren Patel, and Professor Robert Shaw. Actually, they were at the time of the chairman of Professor Maher Mahran. We did the first actually meeting with the members and fellows in the Population Council, and this was in 1996. This was followed by the first British-Egyptian Forum in 1997 in Alexandria. It was an international conference, more than 1,500 participants, and many international speakers. And Professor Hassan Salam was the president of this meeting. I was the secretary, and it was under the patronage of Professor Mahran. Then I remember that Professor Mahran asked me to come and go with him, with Professor Robert Shaw. Can we have the sound? Professor Robert Shaw to Alexandria to recognize Shadbi Hostel. And we went with the train. We did the meeting. It was very interesting. And they accepted the Shadbi Hostel as a recognized hospital for training. On our way back, he asked me, who is the right person to follow Professor Mahran? So I told him Professor Mahran is irrepressible. He is very strong. He's a minister, politically very strong. But I told him the two really I'm aware of is Professor Gamal Surur and Professor Salam. So in the farewell party, Professor Maher Mahran, he asked Professor Robert Shaw, because of his responsibilities, to quit the chairmanship of the representative committee. And he asked for all the members and fellows that he will actually do an election for the members of the committee. So this was the first ERC elections. And those who succeeded in the election, Professor Surur, Professor Salam, Professor Adil Nawar, Hamdi Al-Afandi, Amr Al-Shalani, and myself. So this was the first committee. And the committee itself elected Professor Gamal Surur to be the first elected chair of the Egyptian Representative Committee in Egypt. You can see the Professor Robert Shaw attended part of his presidency. Professor Alan Templeton, who is a very good friend of Professor Surur, also was the president of the college, and Professor William Dunlop. The committee really was very active. We started a long activity. So we did the first continuous professional development program with Professor Surur for 2 years, 6 meetings every year. We went everywhere in Egypt, from Cairo to Minya, to Alexandria, to Mansoura, to Port Said, to Domyat. And so we had this scientific meeting, and this was followed by another 2 years sponsored from one of the companies for another. So we had nearly 4 years of continuous professional development when there was no professional development programs being done anywhere. During his presidency, Professor Surur, he brought the Part 2 MRCOG, because Professor Mahran was the first one to bring the Part 1 MRCOG in Egypt. Professor Surur brought the Part 2 MRCOG written exam in Egypt. So this actually facilitated a lot for the Egyptian candidates to go for the exam. And then people, when they succeed or pass the exam, they go for the the clinical part in the UK. We did the first teleconference in Ops and Gynae with an official RCOG meeting in collaboration with Cairo University and the Egyptian Representative Committee, and it was very successful meeting. Professor Surur, among many, many things really we learned from him, he actually chaired the first British Congress in 2005. And it was really a success. More than 2,000 delegates attended from all over the world in Egypt. And it was a very successful Congress. We learned a lot from Professor Surur really, as management, as leading other things. We did also the first Egyptian Representative Committee bulletin. And you can see the Eye of Horus on the left-hand side. So this was our logo at that time. And I remember this is actually the design of, not the design, the idea of Professor Hassan Salam. So we put a lot of things in this bulletin, and it kept going for quite a long time. And then came one of the meetings when we had dinner with Professor Salam and our late Professor or Dr. Adil Nawar. And there was Jim Dornan, the senior vice president of the college. I think Professor Surur will remember, Professor Hussam Fahim, and maybe Professor Amr Al-Shalani will remember. And there was only one diaspora, which is in Iraq, that actually collection of Iraqi doctor in the UK that helped the Iraq. So we told Professor Dornan, why not we have a lot of Egyptians now in the UK? Why not to make an official body to cooperate with us? So he disappeared, and then after maybe a year, he came back to Professor Surur, and he told him, we are going to do the liaison group all over the countries, or in many countries. So Egyptian Representative Committee was the first one. And here we started with the second elected chair of the Representative Committee, Professor Amr Al-Shalani, my dear friend. So he actually started the first UK liaison group and there was many of them actually sitting with us today. And the first one was the late, our friend, Dr. Muhammad Hatem was the first chair, followed by Dr. Sharif Abd Fattah, who is sitting here in front of me, the chair, followed by Ayman Al-Naqa, and then Hatem Musa, and then Professor Muhammad Abdel Fattah. I'm sure he's here somewhere. So, and he also started the first Egyptian Representative Committee International Conference, and this is in liaison with the Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. Professor Anthony Falconer was the president at that time, and Sir Arul Kumaran was also present. And I remember that we did two important meetings with them. One, a CTG, we did it in Ain Shams, more than 200 attendees, and it was really amazing meeting. And the second one is the International Workshop of Postpartum Hemorrhage, where we have in this meeting Chris from USA, there is B. Lynch, Professor Arul Kumaran, Professor Assam Al-Hammami, and it was a very successful workshops all over Egypt. More than 750 eminent doctors, senior doctors attended this meeting in Cairo and in Alexandria. And it was hands-on workshop. As you can imagine, if you see Professor Arul Kumaran doing the hands-on workshop, you know, for the how to do the Bakri balloon with in a low-resource country, and Professor B. Lynch is showing everyone his technique. It was really an amazing time. However, it was at the time of the revolution. We remember we were in Alexandria, and on the 27th of January 2011, and we were supposed to go back to Egypt after the meeting, and it was Friday morning, and then we said, let's go earlier. And we went earlier because we thought that there's something going to happen. Professor Arul Kumaran managed to take the last flight to travel, but the other B. Lynch stayed for around 2 weeks in Egypt in Sunesta Hotel. The third elected representative committee chair, it was me between 2012 to 2019. And these are the excellent chairs or president of the Royal College. You have Anthony Falconer, Professor or Dr. David Richmond, and Professor Dame Leslie Regan. What happened? We increased the number of the MRCOG candidates. At one point, we had first around 20 Part 2 MRCOG going for the exam, and then became 30, became 60, and then we had 200, and we asked the college that we cannot actually accommodate more than 200. So this is one thing. The second thing that we established the Egyptian Representative Committee Society, members of the and fellows of the Egyptian Representative Committee. Long time, me, Professor Surur and Professor Amr Shalani, we wanted to do this, but it was really difficult to do it at that time. But you know, at the time of the revolution, anyone who's taking money from abroad, then they interrogate him and probably they will put him in jail. So we tried to do the society. We put the bylaws of the society the same as the bylaws of the Royal College. So even the election of the Egyptian Representative Committee board will be actually matching exactly the election done by the college and satisfying the Ministry of Social Affairs requirements. One day, I was actually called by one of the higher authorities, Riqaba al-Idariya, and they interrogated me for quite a long time. What are you doing? What's the Royal College doing? Where do you get the money? And so I was just actually finished doing the society paperwork. So I showed them the society paperwork, so they let me go. Otherwise, I would have been in jail at that time. We did a lot of cooperation with the liaison group, with Professor Hatem, Professor Sharif, Professor Muhammad Al Fattah, Hatem Musa, and Ayman Al Naqa. We did a lot of basic practical skills of the Royal College. We trained many doctors. We did laparoscopic in cooperation with Ain Shams University, with Azhar, hysteroscopic with Galat Hospital, with different universities, CTG, urogynecology in different Mataraya, Ain Shams, Azhar. So we went everywhere and every university. We collaborated with every society in Egypt, with the Egyptian Society of Obstetrics and Gynecology, with Cairo University, Ain Shams, and many to go. This was actually the look of the part 1 and part 2 ERC RCOG before, because now it is completely different. Most of them are online. And we managed to do around maybe 7 to 8 international Egyptian representative committee, inviting all the members of the college, president, vice president, and consultants from and professors from all over Egypt as well, and international. This is my dear friend Hassan Salam and Amr Shalani. Once he took his appointment, I think we'll add Professor Surur and then Professor Yasser Abu Talib in this photo. Then came the 4th elected chair of the representative committee, Professor Salam. And this was the time of Corona, so it was a really hard time for him. But he managed to get, for the first time, part 3 ERC RCOG in Egypt. And during the Corona, he did an online webinars and conference and doing Women International Day meetings. And here you can have Eddie Morris and Professor Rani Thakur. And you know, Professor Salam, he liked food, you know, so I got this picture, Professor Salam, if you don't mind. Professor Salam did actually also many meetings after that, and many webinar meetings. So you can see many of the doctors from Egypt and abroad. You can see here Muhammad Yahya and many actually to go. The 5th and the current chair of the representative committee, Professor Yasser Abu Talib. I think what he did, he make more involvement of the fellows and members of the Royal College in Egypt. We got more actually number of fellows, quite huge. We started maybe when we did the society, it was only 41 actually in the society. Now I think there are more than 350. So this is amazing. He ran the first online exam with the college, and we ran the circuits on site in Egypt, part 3 ERC RCOG circuits, increasing the circuits not only to 1 circuit, then to 2 circuits, and then 3 circuits for 2 days consequently. And he's doing this actually amazing conference today. So this is very quick, and because of the time, I had to remove many things, but I want to say that the fellow addendum, we had Fuad Al-Hifnawi, Murad Al-Abd, Professor Mahmoud Fathallah, I cannot ignore it, Professor Fayyad, Professor Mukhtar Tabuzada, honored also Professor Abul Ghar and Professor Muhammad Mumtaz and Ahmed Fawzi Galal from the college. And this is great really to have recognized doctors from Egypt for this, you know. So there are many things, many photos, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Noury.